Hello, and welcome to the Fohlio presentation, Building an AI-Ready Design Practice, Reducing Manual Work, and Improving Project Delivery. I'm pleased to introduce today's presenters, Quibin Yu and Kara Olin. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. So my name is Quibin. I'm CEO and founder of Fohlio. I'm here with Kara, our Director of Marketing. So today's topic is building an AI-ready design practice. So as a software company, we work with many design firms and procurement agents around the world, help them complete project on time, on brand, on budget. And during the process of servicing their projects, we actually have learned a lot of latest best practice from our clients, how they leverage AI and different AI skills and agents to build different connections and automated workflow from the rendering phase to specification, purchasing, financial, and project management. So in today's webinar, we're going to share some of the best practice we have learned from our clients. Hope that will be helpful. And also some of the constraint, what we have learned. There's like obstacle that like AI tooling might not able to bridge the gap, and what are the solutions we basically has discovered with the clients to basically create a best practice that with the software system and connect your AI skills and increase the productivity so that you can scale your practice, with better bottom line. So, Kara.
Thanks, Raven. Just so you guys just get started, AI is entirely dependent on the quality of data that it is fed. If your firm's historical project data, vendor pricing, and inventory levels are scattered across disconnected spreadsheets, legacy ERPs, and local hard drives, that AI is going to fail. It's not going to be able to produce the quality stuff that you want it to. Furthermore, the entire design industry relies on thousands of boutique vendors and artisans who do not have a digitally mature inventory system. So if a vendor's API doesn't update the stock or pricing in real time, your AI might specify items that are discontinued or suddenly over budget. And with that, you designers are often spending up to 50% of your time on non-design work. That's managing schedules and budgets, coordinating teams, handling procurement, and maintaining documentation. That leaves less time for the creative work that clients actually pay you to do. This is one of the main reasons why we are seeing so many designers like you guys today looking into AI tools. So what AI can do? It can really improve the concept and visualization phase, the specification and sourcing, and the financial insights. We're going to break down each of those within this presentation. But just to get started, I would love to hear from you guys. Hit those emoji buttons. Let me know where you are using AI the most today. Concept and visualization, I'm seeing a handful of. That's where we see most people start adopting it. All right, we got some specification and sourcing. Not many people are doing financial insights yet with AI. So those slides are going to be we'll try to hone in on those, make sure you guys really get the insights out of those slides as well. So AI drastically shortens the feedback loop during the schematic phase. Tools like Midjourney, Reimagine Home, or natively integrated AI and CAD software allow you to generate those 3D spatial walkthroughs and photorealistic renders in minutes rather than days. Sounds like you guys are already a little bit familiar with those. This helps secure that client buy-in much earlier in the process. But this isn't the only way that you can implement AI in your work, but there are so many other ways to reduce your workload. Wavin, can you get us into the 4 hidden data traps?
Sure. So we have worked with some of our clients who basically collaborate with us to build digital version of the physical material libraries. And then so all try to really create rendering as real as possible. So one of their needs is really bring those finished informations and visual examples like paint colors, wood finishes into, for example, your rendering software. like SketchUp, etc. And then meanwhile, it's not been easy because a lot of their information from the vendors are really different actually attributes and different standards of like naming conventions. So it is something that I think some of you guys are already trying to explore what's the best practice to do that. And the other is Excel trap. We all love Excel. It's easy to use. But the problem is that Excel is not really standardized, especially for if the larger the practices, you probably have so many different stakeholders and team members, internal, external, are using different format of Excel file. So AI is able to, for example, curate some data across different Excel files. But if you have 20, 50 projects ongoing and you have specs in one Excel file and then you have the financial in another Excel file, it's very, very hard to make sure that the data are translate properly across different documents, right? And the other is naming inconsistency. So although a lot of the manufacturers now provide different, for example, Revit family, as well, sketch object for you to add to your rendering drafting software. But because the parameters and attributes they use are kind of different, it's still very hard to actually create that standardized digital library and then easily filter and source the right material to apply to your basically models. And the last thing is really analytics. So kind of related to the Excel trap. For if you're in the leadership team, it's super important to have the latest insight in terms of, okay, how much I'm actually getting billed from the clients. Is there any change orders that actually push my bottom line? That's no surprise. And is my project on target? Which vendors are the best we should work with and promote more with my design team? And why is that? So having data still in very, very scattered formats, and even AI is hard to actually provide that good insights, especially on ongoing basis as your business continues to scale across different segments. So in summary, what we have learned is that some of the strategy is really think about what type of data you need to standardize, and then how you can create connected basically product material library from your preferred vendors, and what are the financial and project insights that you need to have no single source of truth from budgeting to specifications to procurement to project delivery phases, and so that you can basically use those data and potentially leverage API or MCP to connect to your cloud or whatever internal software to get those information in one place. And then, so let's go to the next slide. So, so there are multiple steps. So one thing that we have learned from some of the clients who actually have really scaled and create their edge for certain type of clients or industry is that they in the leadership team has intentionally create, for example, packages or collections that tailor to different type of projects. For example, some firms, they might have different studios. Some studios specialize in model home. The other studios specialize in healthcare or senior housing or hospitality. And essentially those studios leadership team would create basically collections. If some of you are working in, for example, retail space, you might also familiar this, you have brand approved product collections for different typology or different project type. So that collection means, okay, what are the common areas? What are your, line item of each spec item, the spec codes, the cost code, as well as the basic requirements, how those products should be spec'd. And then one of the benefit of creating those packages is actually for quick estimation and client proposals. So in terms of like pitching to clients, make sure that you have a very, very clear understanding of like what everything can cost by different categories and areas. So creating those like collections of packages would help you basically just like plug in whatever like BOQ or potential like test fit materials to understand how much it will cost. So it will like basically fast track your estimation and client proposal speed. And then the other benefit of actually creating those collections is that the product that you use in collections ideally are from your preferred vendors. So as your company scale, you might have established some very strong relationship with the vendors that have consistently produced very good products as well as good services, provide you those like technical insights that help you execute project efficiently, and then support you in the even like the post-sales process. So we have seen some of the best practice that the collections will be filled in with like recommended vendors as well as like preferred vendors, and what the products, how products should be specified, and then the product from those vendors and collections will be centralized in our platform. It's called like basically product catalogs. Can be things from preferred vendors or just anything product that have used and approved in the past. And then with like nowadays with AI, it's much easier actually to centralize like those information, and then like we have built different AI skills to work with clients to basically pull all those products from the like Excel-based collections or PowerPoint collections and into this like centralized like a database for reuse and estimations. So one of the benefit of like also using AI is to comparison and selections, and then so essentially like think about value engineering, and you want to provide like options very quickly with clients. So like with different AI toolings, you can easily pull product data and create comparison table and RFQ submittal table for clients and our side, because it's very centralized process, and that's basically like one of the process that we see a lot of clients find very helpful. Okay. The other is like connect with your drafting and rendering software. So in one end, you now can use AI, for example, to generate your spec list from your rendering images, and then put that in to connect with like basically another workflow and skills to fill in whatever specifications you get from your preferred vendors, and then through like a centralized like product database, you can fill that back in your rendering software to see okay what actually it will look like with the real product that's specified and what are the options out there. But those definitely take some, I would say, that very careful plannings and someone who with like technical insights to make sure that everything's connected end to end, because some of the like data mismatch, like product discontinued, might be reflected in one database, but if it's not immediately reflected in your like rendering drafting software, then will cause some issues down the road. You have to respecify a lot of like pain with your clients. For some of you who are working on commercial projects, I'm pretty sure that you do with a lot of custom fabrications, like for hospitality, healthcare, etc., as well as luxury residentials. One problem we noticed that like tuition is a very common I would say that like phenomenon for design firms. You constantly hire like junior designers and train them up, but they will leave, and you have to basically retrain the new staff members. So especially for custom fabrications like furnitures or lighting fixtures, there are a lot of like nuances and important information need to be captured and managed in the like proper submittal processes. So another best practice is like create like very good custom fabrication templates for some of the things that you usually do for your specialty projects, so that if you use AI to grab product information into those product specs, and it have standardized format for you to pull those information in. So essentially have those good SOP set up for your specification process. It will basically be a foundation and make sure that all the information are captured completely as well as accurately, and then it will make it easy for you to generate all this spec book down the road.
Thanks, Raven. That was a lot on how to just the benefits of specifying and procuring within one data management system. Let's get a little bit more into the procurement and then how AI actually can be utilized. So obviously finding the right FF&E traditionally is a massive time sink. AI can help here with your run-of-the-mill chatbots. A lot of the steps can be done with individual prompts. Not to say that this is the best solution to do it individually all on their own, but you could do takeoff via uploaded floor plan, convert spec PDF files into an Excel formatted schedule, convert raw design selections into formatted spec sheets and RFPs that contractors and vendors can actually read. However, individual AI chat and prompts are not a workflow task list with a dashboard. It still acts at central visibility for management. Chatbots cannot easily provide you with the detailed financial metrics that a lot of you guys are not using AI for right now. But let's take a look at each of these anyways. So we have takeoff via, sorry, my button isn't working. Takeoff via an upload a floor plan. So if you upload the floor plan to AI, it can calibrate the scale, create the measurements, and analyzes the components and export a material and cost estimate. As well, you can generate formatted spec sheets and other documents. So if you're uploading your design brief to a chatbot, tell it what you want it to do, it can assemble that content and spit it out in a different format that you need it in. But you may need very complex prompt experimentation to make it work for complex projects. And again, you're going to be pasting your information in every time you need it to create a prompt, as well as that information isn't linked to anything. Once it creates that document and when you put it into as well as when you put it into the chatbot, it's not linked to anything. So if there's ever an update, the version of the document is not going to get updated either. Hence why you want to kind of collaborate, link both AI and in all-in-one platform together. So with that, we have 5 friction points that you tend to see procurement teams face. So that's individual vendors. My animation's not loading. Well, good enough. No animation, but individual vendors have different format quote documents. There's no centralized platform for comparing those quotes. And sometimes even if there is a platform, team members still need to copy and paste quotes into the system, which increases the risk for error and takes up valuable time. Then when using AI chats, organizations lack the prompt standards, and then the generated documents lack a firm-wide standard template. So there's no central visibility for management, and there's no clear version history. Because individual AI chat and prompts are not a workflow task list with a dashboard, data is still siloed and not usable for cross-project or team analytics. Weaven, why don't you get us into the solution for some of that?
Sure. So there are a few things that we have learned from our clients that I would like to share. It's not a perfect solution, but I think that still help everybody kind of speed up the process. One is that if you have your ERP tool, like accounting tooling, or your particular workflow management softwares with your dashboard, is to basically connect with the API. So like the API, I don't know how familiar you guys with API. There's like something called webhook API, and also we have like MCP. Basically, is like a wrapper of the API. But it's very important to like articulate what data actually you want to pull out of whatever software you're using right now, and then like have very able to articulate, how, for example, what are the status of the data you want to see, how frequently you want to, what are day range you want to see, like what you don't want to see, what you do want to see, and how it should be summed up or aggregate or averaged together, and then pull those information to whatever like centralized dashboard you are using. And I ideally just create it as a skill so that can be shared with different team members or studio partners you're working with, and pull those project information. And if your existing project information in just very different Excel format files or 3 different platforms. And another is vendor quote comparison. I would say that I have seen experimentation, there are success and there are also limitation in terms of how much you can use AI to do quote comparison. So definitely AI can read a lot of PDF documents, can be submittal from your vendors, catalogs or invoice and shipment informations. So those can be also pulled out and put into whatever software you're using to do your quote comparison table. But the limitation is that the different vendors, especially vendors of different product categories, they have a very, very different format of those quote documents. So it's definitely need to train them one by one, what this quote format look like from these vendors, and make sure that your individual team members can also inherit those Fohlio skills you're building. And so this is definitely, I would say that one of the time saying that we've seen a lot of customers they doing without AI or even with AI, just do a lot of basically collection and manually copy and paste of data generated from ChatGPT or AI into whatever Excel file they have. So that's definitely one of the things that we have worked very closely with clients and come up with a solution for, right? Learning basically different major hundreds of vendors, how their PDF document look like, and how to use AI to automatically create quote comparison and VE table. So I would say that AI is very powerful in terms of collecting individual document images and extract and do analysis, but turn different data coming out from AI into automations of workflow. I would say that is something some tooling able to provide that, the different project management software and that can basically do some of those works. And but it's you need careful plannings or identify a solution that can really connect the workflow end to end, from the vendor details, water brand collection, how you want to do catalog management, specification to individual project, approval statuses, what are the key deadlines, and where do you land in terms of financial, and also is it something that we can basically share with collaborators, for example your freight forwarder, to input those information, right? So essentially there's definitely things can be done through DIY, but there's also why there's a benefit to look at platform that can basically consider those different pieces. And when we do the poll from the very beginning, we saw a lot of people give the heart emoji, definitely using AI in terms of the drafting, rendering, and concept space. And then we also see some emoji in terms of like generating specification documents. And it's definitely, I can split up a lot of beautiful template specification document and just make sure that those template can be standardized across like different projects as well as different users in your firm, and made worth like mandate that, okay, everybody must use like this particular AI agent, or use the particular skills, and here's a reference template to generate those documents. But the hardest thing we notice actually is really the financial side of the business. Is to, like, I would say that it's a mixed bag of success and limitation of how much you can use AI for. The reason being that there are different life cycle stage of information from financial sides, but also you need to provide different financial information with like different stakeholders internally with the finance team, your clients, your designers, as well as your contractor, right? So for clients, you only want to see how much they need to pay, what are the budget allocation, is any change orders causing additional funding you have to ask them for, and how to justify that eloquently. And then with design team members, sometimes they don't necessarily need to know kind of how much margin you're making, but they have to follow certain budget requirements, and how they should look at the budget, as well as which vendor they should potentially work with more, so that because there is minimum order. So those are the things that it is so many different pieces of information. It was difficult. We have seen that for AI to achieve to a certain degree of success. And then lastly is really financial insights. There are a lot of accounting software out there, but most of the accounting software is not really made for this industry, and with very specific workflows. And so how can pull the information from different Excel file and feed that into whatever accounting software you're using, or whatever, if you have a specification procurement software like ours, how to use API to put the right data into a financial dashboard, and the ERP system, accounting system, those are the things that it's definitely a lot of conversation about it. So we have learned a lot of best practice in terms of the financial plannings, etc. So in terms of the cookbook, right? What's the playbook? In terms of pulling all those financial data together from whatever software you're using, can be a cloud-based platform, Excel file for different projects. Some of the best practice are the following. Number one is define your KPI. What the core KPI is most important for you. And the second is how you do custom, especially fabrication cost calculation accurately, and how to dissect the data for different users in that you're working with internally and externally. So in terms of define KPI, the firm that we have noticed that really scale successfully, they do an amazing job in terms of budget and estimation tracking, various degree of preliminary budget, and as the project progress, how the budgets move from material costs to labor costs to different minor, even soft costs like margins and allowances, etc. So I have a very granular cost KPI planning would really help you to capture what are signals where I'm losing money and where are the things that I can reduce the cost. The other is really cost pricing, because we're buying stuff off the shelf. You also probably do a lot of custom fabrications that has higher margins, and which particular vendors you are doing certain type of markup agreements and stuff like that. So have that playbook ready by category, by product type, by vendors, establish in a structures, I would say that tooling, no matter what tooling you use, is super important, and how it's connected to the specs variation, right? And the other is clients. So set up your target margin very early on, and then connect your target margin, right, with your cost calculations with different products, and then see when you do different VE or options and how that impact your margin. and also especially the soft costs, a lot of time the surprise really come from the end of the project. A lot of the change orders and soft costs like commonly happened, and that's kind of unexpected. Especially if you're doing a large commercial project that you need to actually work with overseas manufacturers to do manufacturings and multiple complex, large container shipments, multiple leg shipments for custom fabrication for hundreds of pieces of furniture. So those are basically the challenging part if you're plan to scale to this kind of large commercial project that really stand out from your competitors, and those are basically foundation you have to set up. Because frankly, I would say that a lot of simple project will be gradually taking over tasks like AI, but the one that really allow our clients to have an edge are just really large complex commercial project. They have a very robust financial tracking systems, robust project management tracking system to make sure that they can have eyes on everything and scale and tell a good story of the quality control with their clients. So I already went through this slides, how to keep track of different pricings. Happy to share this PowerPoints after the call with everybody so you can use that as your reference.
Yeah, and with what Wavin just shared, all this financial information, you have to very much be concerned about privacy. Hence why role-based access is super important. You want a very granular access so that your designers see the design information, your vendors only see what they're quoting. You can go down to the item level, what they see. You only have access to the projects that are relevant to you. One, for privacy and security, but also just to make your life easier so you're not filtering through all this information that's not relevant to you. The client signs in and they see exactly what they need to see. They're not trying to find, okay, where is my project? So this helps minimize risks and also simplifies your onboarding. And really, it makes managing access a lot easier when you have it by the role. And it gives you a clean audit trail when every user is in the system to see who's doing what, who's made the approvals, the client's checked it off. It's not living in an email somewhere. And it supports the separation of responsibilities. Most importantly, though, it's easier external sharing without sharing too much information. That is the key. So you can share it with those logistic partners without any concerns of sharing all of your information.
Okay. So with all this lesson learns and some of their most critical questions that I think everybody need to really think very hard and answer as we now full speed into this AI age, and how to leverage different platform and AI tooling to scale your business. And here are some other questions I would love everybody to brainstorm together. One is okay, what project I'm specialized in, and where which type of project I make the most money, and how can I complete more of the same type of projects faster without have to scale my headcount extensively. Like I mentioned, especially this industry, there's a lot of children in terms of junior team members, right? And one of the biggest I've heard from some of the principal is how I can train my team member with the best SOP, with the best project template, with the best cost calculation. So one thing is definitely have those cookbook ready, have those template ready, have your best practice ready, and how to also turn those best practice into, for example, some AI skills, so that can be reused again across different projects and reduce manual data input time as well as error. The other things within the whole projects, where do I make money and lose money. So make money particularly which services I can deliver, because you can provide many different services, right? You can provide design services, you can provide procurement services, you can provide construction administrative services. So how to track where I'm making money, where I'm losing money consistently, that would really help you all make an educated decision, like, shall I offer the services or not? And if I do want to offer the services, like, how can I increase efficiency? And the other thing is that which vendors we want to work with more. I think that's actually where a centralized platform can come in. Of course, with like, accounting tool, you are able to capture how much, PO you have to cut with a certain vendors, right? And then what my trade volume discount would be because those PO volume. But how can I do that preemptively, right? Because the key thing is that plan ahead of time that, hey, with this much project volume, I can potentially give this preferred vendor, say, $5 million of business. How can I make sure that my designers actually aware that, this is the vendor they should work with so that we can hit that, kickback or rebate goals. So have those like data insights and plan that, strategy is super important. And then as you are considering, okay, what part you're building your in-house AI skills, what part you're using a software, or like if your existing platform can meet your business like scaling needs. So there are quite a few things you can consider. One is that is the platform AI native and forward thinking, like instead of like me building different skills with my limited time to like import all this like data from different vendor files from my different Excel project management spreadsheets, like is the platform able to actually have already best practice of AI skills to ingest those information. And also there's no one single platform can do everything, right? You have many different drafting software, you have accounting software, your project management software. All those software do come with like API that's easy to use and understand, so you don't have to hire a IT consultant that's very expensive to build this connection point. And or add those like API have like MCP wrapper wrap around it, so that if you use, for example, Claude or ChatGPT or Gemini, then you can easily basically just like query the data from that platform and get the business insight. For example, I'm have a client meeting coming up, where we stand with this client in terms of like financials and what are the risks, like is this project gonna run over by how much and how much time. So like have that information on your fingertips with those like MCP and I would say that like AI plugin will be very helpful. So when you're evaluating different solutions, definitely think about those, and that will make a big difference.
Yeah, just for those of you who aren't that AI savvy or tech savvy, the MCP wrapper is really what AI needs to not consume a million tokens when you ask it to access the information. An API, it's like two different languages. AI can translate it, but if it's in an MCP wrapper, then it's like it's already translated for AI to go in and access what it needs. So with that, let's just go over the main points that we covered in this webinar on why to adopt an all-in-one tool. So first of all, it gives you a centralized data and workflow platform, so you can manage your entire project from estimations to specifications to purchase all the way to install, all in one platform. And with an all-in-one tool, your data is structured in a way that AI can actually use. So more than just AI, the right platform like Fohlio has an API allowing you to connect your data with Revit, SketchUp, QuickBooks, or any accounting software, your ERP, or anything else your organization needs, like Claude or ChatGPT or Gemini or whichever chatbot you decide to use, or any other system. I was thinking of one a moment ago that I wanted to include, but I forgot now. And then with an all-in-one tool that has detailed access controls, you should be able to invite all of your stakeholders to a platform, giving them the ability to see what they need. So clients can make approvals, vendors can submit pricing, warehouse teams can mark orders as received, purchasing teams can make those orders within the system and track it within the system with an API that tracks the ordering, so they're not constantly updating the status of the order. They see it live updated from FedEx or whoever has that tracking code. And you're no longer stuck sending those emails updates back and forth saying, here's the status of my project. Here's that spec book with all the new changes. Oh, what order got canceled that we need to reevaluate? Everything lives in one system. You can see what tasks are on your plate that need to be handled right away, see where you're overdue, what needs to be ordered ASAP, what has a few more days to get ordered, what is over budget or under budget, and really make those fine-tune adjustments where they need to be made, because everything lives in one live system. With that, just to summarize, the future of interior design is truly data-driven. If you want to have an AI-ready design practice, you want to have your data consolidated into a way that AI can understand it, utilize it, put it into BI project reports, etc. With that, feel free to drop some questions into the Q&A. We'll start answering those now.
Okay.
Great. Thanks, Kevin and Kara. Yeah, if you, like Kara just said, please put your questions into the Q&A on the right-hand side, and we'll start with some of the questions that are here already. So the first question says, exterior building enclosure shop drawing reviews.
This is a great question. I would say that in terms of shop drawing reviews, especially for exterior building enclosure, it's really varies project by projects, and but I believe that maybe Jeff, you specialize in certain type of projects. I think that's some of the number ones. Okay, the type of project I'm specialized in, what kind of exterior enclosure materials or the way of being constructed, specify is done. And then if you're a senior member of the team, write down those best practice. What are the checkpoints that need to be checked? What are steps that need to be done? And turn that into a skill so that you can upload a document. For example, whatever shop drawing documents, whatever product specs document for manufacturers, and do the first scan for you. And that can be basically applied not just for exterior building enclosure shop drawing, but can be applied for any other I would say the more complex, product submittal review process. And then one thing that I do feel that AI is not able to do is that, especially if submittal review process involves so many different stakeholders, from architects to contractors and vendors, and sometimes they have specialty trades like lighting consultants or furniture consultants and etc. Then that will be kind of difficult. You still need like a collaborative, centralized platform for everybody to view. But definitely one of the things that we're already thinking is to allow our user build their skills so that they can embed it on our platform, so that their skill will basically being run and just do the first round of shop drawing review and highlight any risk. And it does not still replace the professional trade experience like you guys have deeply. That's you need to be check before passing the next step. But definitely one of the trend that we're looking at is how to help our users create more skills in our platform so that they can use those skills to automate some of the process themselves within a collaborative platform. Reviewing contractor substitutions. And yes, I think that's something that AI can do really well, is basically identify, what are the common elements, for example, that meet their spec requirements, but what are the variations, for example, too far away from the original specs and design intent. When their contractors submit substitutions, and then I think the key is to, if you want to scale, another thing is how to make it scalable, right? Not just one person, but also different team members working on different projects can use those kind of AI skills and also have a very good UX interface, user experience interface for them to identify the variance. especially different product have different attributes you need to compare. So that's where I would say that some of the AI limitation is. Right, you can do it like things more like a one-off individual projects, but hey, you want to have a standardized process and interface to track everything, and that's something like a platform that specializes in this kind of process would be beneficiary. And yes, I totally agree with you. Current was a system with many parts and components, and that's why one of the piece I mentioned is like for any custom fabrications, like for example window treatments, is so complex, right? Hospitality specialty case goods, certain like specialty equipments are very complex with many components and parts. Have like a template that making sure that specify what are components parts need to come with, what accessory need to purchase, and what are minimum requirements of those parts for different project types, because healthcare have very specific requirements on what fabric or your finishes, your chemical treatments requirements are. So as like hospitality for different brands. For example, the select brands will have this requirement, luxury brand have this requirements, whatever corporate clients you have with the certain requirements. Have those templates set up properly, making sure those requirements are properly identified in their standard attributes for those custom fabrications. And then you set up this foundation, then you can use AI to pull product data from different vendors, or even like use AI to scan your vendor's catalog to identify the right product that meet those requirements, and then put that into your spec book. What I'm talking about, yes, is many different steps. It needs to be planned properly, and basically that's what we have learned with clients, so that's what we work with client for.
Great, thank you, Kevin. Okay, I got a few more questions here. As a firm grows in designers from like say 10 to 50, what operational processes tend to break down first, and how can the technology help?
Oh my gosh. Because we signed NDA, so we cannot elaborate the detailed 50-page of SOP we have received our clients. One thing is to, I would say the one thing that like very helpful is, for example, you would train your junior staff, right? When you train your junior staff, even those in person, maybe one of the things to do is actually have your, for example, Zoom meeting or whatever like meeting recorder on. Because when you train them verbally, right, those basically best practice that you have learned from, how to make sure that your estimate is accurate, and how you specify this particular type of, special fabrication, and make sure that how you communicate with your contractors and vendors. So make sure that those meetings are actually recorded with whatever tooling you use, and then you turn those meeting record notes into SOP documents. And things do get changed, as you will also have a different discipline, right? And just make sure that those are being done. Maybe worth have like quarterly or semi-annual review process, have those meetings, make sure record it, and then just ask AI skill to update the best practice. And then once those best practice is created, right, from your meeting recording in whatever, Word documents, and then look into which particular steps you can actually automate, right? Either data, extraction from vendor websites, or best practice of creating your, concept board, and just turn that basically into like a guardrail checkboxes, and make sure that those things are being done and properly recorded. Yeah, it's definitely worth basically maybe just clean your calendar up 2 to 3 days and do that practice. I know that you all have like so many meetings, clients deadline you want to meet, but like do that reflection and have this like setup process would be very helpful.
Yeah, I'd also add to that, just make sure your organization knowledge and your product knowledge doesn't live in your head or in your team member's head. Have everything documented in any way that you can, ideally in a central way that everyone can access, so that when you add new team members on, they can explore that knowledge rather than constantly having to ask people who are already too busy. That's why you hired a new person.
Yeah, and then the other thing is that you just really empower your staff members to actually come up with ideas and find the right solutions and level them up, because a lot of junior folks, they are very AI forward. They don't like doing the things traditional way. They don't like copy and paste data. So empower them to automate as much as possible, because like as a senior members, you do have a lot of like physical space project execution insights, but you might not have the time and bandwidth to do prompt experimentation. And so those are the things that I would say to strike a balance. How much time allocate to do the work, how much time allocate your staff to do some AI exploration, technical discussion, what best tooling out there, etc.
Great. Thank you both for answering that. The next question is, what mistakes do you see firms that are making with specifications that end up costing them time and money later in procurement?
I would say that this happened more on complex project commercial ones. Of course, if it's residential, you can easily just, I would say that like pull out of data from vendor websites and stuff like that. And yeah, definitely is really just like I mentioned, when you do custom fabrications, if not familiar with the environment that your client's in, and that doesn't have a good communication with your clients who are I would say, the actual execution expert of particular needs, and so therefore translate those very specific project needs into technical details early enough, and get your clients involved early on in reviewing those specification early on, especially for high-end, I would say, the complex hospitality projects or healthcare projects, food and beverage projects. We have seen that a lot. That the actual operators are really the expert of how things need to be operated, and so they need to really have visibility of the specs very early on to provide you the approval, and then also have a very good project management tracking systems, because a lot of time the manufacturers really need you to review and approve all the specs by a certain deadline before they can actually meet the manufacturing and shipment lead time themselves. So how to have project tracker to make sure that, okay, when did I receive all the shop drawings, all the finished sample, all the flame certificates from my vendors, who need to review when, by what date, and have those tracking system put in place no matter what tooling you use, and you have a bird's eye view in terms of what things is actually running against a deadline. Ideally, you are not the only one who pleasing it, but all your staff member have a centralized dashboard or their systems see that, so that they can run the project without you constantly have to put down the fire. That's basically very important to have to scale, especially into this large complex projects.
We actually had a client find out about Fohlio because they had experienced this issue with their project where they had specified all the items, but it was over budget or couldn't be found when the procurement team got a hold of it, that they switched out items here and there, and it totally lost the design intent. The designers weren't informed of the changes in time for them to make the corrections. They're saying, no, don't replace it with that. And the project got built, and when the designers went and looked at it, they're like, the owners decided to redo the entire project because it had totally lost the design intent from the original design based off all of the swaps. So communication is really key. And that's why they looked into Fohlio. They're like, we got to make sure we have everything tracked, everything approved by the right people before we go to the next stage. So we're not spending too much money on things that we don't actually want, that ruins the project.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that answer. The next question here is that AI is a popular topic today. Which repetitive tasks do you think firms should automate first to see the biggest return?
Yeah, that I feel a lot of individual already, especially on the design concept phase, right? You already, especially they're very early on. You don't need to have very, very accurate dimensions. Just the feels, right? The color, the tone, the theme, that I guess everybody's already doing that with different AI tooling. And then I would say that, documentations, I see that, if you want to, if it does not matter to you, every single document created have slightly different format when you send to your clients, I would say that yes, just have a general AI skills for your and template for your team member to use. If that's not super important for you. But if you want something okay, every single presentation, not just a presentation, but also a task tracker, right? You mark down which comment has been resolved by your clients and what items is approved on these presentations, and that then worth basically looking to a platform that can do both presentation as well as design approval tracking that can then become into a purchase order. So financial is definitely, I would say that connecting financial data with product specification data is very hard, because financial is kind of like secret, you don't want your designer to fully have knowledge about. Maybe it's something that procurement and financial team and the principal need to have, but they need to have the live product data sync. So that's something that you can probably use some of the plugin of Clouds and to pull some data into Excel, but still it's one individual project itself. It's not a cross-project dashboard where you can see how you can basically channel more purchasing volume across different projects into one vendors to get more rebates. So there are different things can be done on an individual project basis. That's why I see AI is really being very helpful. But if you want to do okay, multiple projects, I want to see where things are, automate, and everything is done in one single playbook, and that's something you have to really invest in the platform.
I have two answers for this. One, either what you hate doing the most, or what takes up the most time of your day that you don't want to be doing. And with that, there's also, but if you want to see more initial value, I could say you could start with using AI to generate really accurate estimates so that you can get clients faster. You can bid on projects a lot easier.
Mm-hmm. I have a question from Hugh Jackson. Does the use of AI eliminate the volume of change orders throughout the project? So, change orders can come from many different reasons. For example, the inventory actually better, vendors actually not able to meet your needs, or say there's shipment problems, and sometimes they're missing a specification of the item. This also happened a lot. Those are some of the common things, essentially things are not being planned early on, so you have to add a particular item in last minute. So those are things, frankly, I don't think AI can eliminate, right? That's why we still have a job. Everyone still has a job. Because it will work on physical space, right? And a lot of things that's unpredictable. But definitely, this is something that yes, we are really, really working with the clients, how we can basically pull as much, for example, shipment information from the supply invoice early on in the system, just drop the supply invoice, and we can just identify, oh, this invoice is from, for example, Restoration Hardware, or Herbert Miller, and then therefore the shipment information here is just automatically feed into this information, so you can know that early on. Okay, how much is my shipment cost, and what's the ship day, expected delivery day, whether it can meet my project timeline or have to go to run to the whatever furniture dealership next door to immediately buy something. So I would say that just think about your data structure, what data you want to capture, high risk data, how to best capture it. You can still do it manually. You can use your own AI tooling, or you can consider a platform like us that's very AI, building a lot of AI skills, because we curate a lot of vendor documented data, so we know how to read those data. Another question is, does Fohlio have risk modeling capacity? No, unfortunately not. Very interesting. I think maybe not like Monte Carlo itself, but definitely like financials, like, especially cash flow, how much you're expecting to pay in the next few months to your vendors or contractors, and how much, like, the cash flow coming in from the clients, and they're basically the margins, right? As well as vendors, if some of clients they are, larger retail organization that they actually have already capital planning 12 months ahead. So like have very detailed, bill of quantity of different locations that roll up to how many items to purchase in different locations around the world, and then combine with the commercial terms with vendors, and they can identify which vendors to best work with and how to negotiate volume discount with them. And even like fabrics, right? Like you can have basically similar fabric from different vendors, but some vendor have like minimum order volume. And how you can have that insight, okay, I have like 5,000 yards from this from this project, another 2,000 yards from that project. Let me make sure designer actually specify from this vendor I have the best trade discount and have the volume minimum threshold. Like how to like provide that data to your designers. I think those are the things that really sophisticated actually project managers and founders, procurement people will need to think about, and how to best making sure those information being communicated across the project cycle as early as possible.
Great. Thank you, ladies, so much. We are at the top of the hour now. We've gone just a little over, so thank you, everybody, for your patience for these amazing questions and very thorough answers by the team here at Fohlio. Thank you both so much, Kevin and Kara, for spending the last hour with us, sharing all of your expertise and knowledge. And for those that, if you did not have a question answered, anything that wasn't addressed today will be sent to the team at Fohlio to follow up with you directly. So on behalf of AEC Daily, thank you all for taking time out of your day to join us. And again, thank you to our presenters, Kevin and Kara. Thank you again so much. And everyone have a wonderful rest of their day.